Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Tina Andrews, and I'm with the Parent Information Center of Delaware. I am a parent consultant at the Parent Information Center. We have been in Delaware for more than 35 years, working with families statewide to provide tools for parents, caregivers, and advocates to help children 0 to 21 receive appropriate education in the state, resources, and to work through any conflict or challenges they might be having with their children's education. We also talk with parents and families about their rights and their parental safeguards. So we work in all 3 counties and of the state. And we have a number of different services. So we do one-on-one consultations. Parents, caregivers, educational surrogates will contact us, and we meet with them. We talk with them on the phone. Sometimes we will attend educational meetings like IEPs or 504 meetings. We also do workshops and webinars like this one today, online and in person throughout the state. And we also are on committees for different conferences and opportunities for learning throughout the state. So coming up on March 13th is the Inclusion Conference. It'll be Dover Downs, but the night before, PIC hosts a parent night, and this year we will be focused on accessible instructional materials. So if you are interested in any of our opportunities or would like to contact a parent consultant about a challenge you are having, please contact our office at 302-999-7394 or go to our website at picofdel.org. Today, we are going to have a presentation from Lydia DeBiase. She is a assistant clinical professor and assistant director of field education at Widener University. She is also the liaison for the Child Welfare Education for Baccalaureates and the Child Welfare Education Leadership Program at Widener University. She teaches the Children and Families at Risk class at the undergraduate and graduate levels on campus and online. She has a private practice specializing in working with maltreated children. She worked in a public child welfare for 17 years and is a certified child welfare worker and supervisor for the state of Pennsylvania. So we are so honored to have Lydia here. The reasons that we had her come is because we know that a lot of our families are building resiliency in their children, and we felt like this was a topic that would speak to them. Hopefully you will get a lot out of this presentation. It is muted. If you have a question, there is a box to the side where you can type questions directly to Lydia or to the entire group. And hopefully at the end, there will be some time for her to answer the questions, or we will contact you directly. Lydia?
Okay, we're good?
Yes.
So thank you for joining me today. I'm extremely excited to be here. I certainly have worked with caregivers and foster parents for many, many years. I'm a little removed from that now, so I'm back. I'm excited to be back and part of it today with you. I have done this presentation before. I have not used it on this platform, so I'm hoping things go smoothly, but if not, we're just going to sort of roll with the punches and do what we can to get information to you. Okay. So I know you can't divide into groups, but I want you to just take a minute and think about your own childhood and the things that you can remember about it that were important. And if you could just take a minute and make a list of 3. It can be a person, a thing, a pet, community, neighborhood, school. Often school teachers are important in children's lives or your religious community. So just take a minute and think about 3 things. If you had to pick the top 3 things that were important to you in your childhood. Okay. So, oops, I'm sorry. It's kind of jumping around on me. I'm not sure what that's about. Okay. So when we look at children who've been abused or neglected or have suffered significant loss, we can look at the child and say what's wrong with the child's behavior, their attitude, or the symptoms. Or we can ask the question, what has happened to this child? And what can I do to help this child move forward? In order to look at how to build resiliency in children, we have to look at how adversity affects children. So I'm going to try to play a quick YouTube. I don't know if this will work on here. So it doesn't look like it's going to. But if we were going to review this, and certainly you can take a minute and write this down and go back and look at it yourself, what adversity shows is that the more adverse things that happen to children, whether it be neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, we know poverty really can take effect on children, not having the proper education that they need. And the more adversity that they have, right, it's sort of like this deeper hole that they get into that we need to really work to sort of help them get out of that. And that's where we talk about, trying to build resiliency for them. So when we look at the effects of maltreatment on behavior, social, and emotional functioning of children, I think that skipped, there we go. What we know happens to them when they've suffered maltreatment is they often get what's called a persistent fear response. So they can't differentiate between danger and safety, right? So they may have been in danger at one point, and their brain has developed to feel like the world is in danger, so that even when we get them to a safe place, it doesn't feel safe for them. They're hyperarousal, which means basically they're highly sensitive to nonverbal cues. And these are the kids that often don't do well in school because instead of focusing on what is happening as academically as far as a math problem or a reading problem, they're busy looking at the teacher and the students, and they're assessing, is it safe here? So all the time they're hypervigilant and hyper-aroused on what is happening in my environment and am I safe or not. They have increased internalizing symptoms, so we have things like anxiety and depression. They have often lower academic achievement, intellectual impairment, decreased IQ, and difficult paying attention. And this isn't because these kids are slower, right? It's because of the environment has not nurtured their natural abilities. Often you'll see delayed developmental milestones caused, this is often caused by prolonged neglect. So they're behind in language, cognitively, behaviorally, socially, emotionally, and physically. I know when we would take children and put them in a foster home, it was so nice. If they were in a good foster home, you really start to see them like to thrive, right? And they start to get caught up on developmentally. They have a weakened response to positive feedback. So they're less responsive to positive stimuli. You just have to be patient with that process and understand it and continue to give them positive feedback and trying to build them up. And don't take it personally when they're not as responsive as you think that they should be. They have complicated social interactions. It's more challenging for them to navigate social situations. So for hurt children, when children are hurt and their healthy development is threatened, they want to regain mastery and control, right, in their environment. So they'll try to do that often in 3 ways. One is pro-social effort, so that's finding comfort, seeking out a trusted adult, adopting positive behaviors such as participation in sports. More and more, the research is showing that any outdoor activities are really helpful for children. And other sports too, indoor sports too, or searching for positive ways to interpret the negative behaviors. The antisocial efforts are things like violence, destruction, stealing, or other crime. So that's sort of the outward display. The inward display is what we call the self-injurious behaviors, and those are things like the cutting, the eating disorders, the substance abuse, and suicide attempts. So what is resiliency? Resiliency refers to the ability to survive or bounce back from pressure or crisis, a kind of emotional buoyancy, right? I had to have two definitions because I like them both. It's the child's ability to adapt to adversity and function despite its existence. And I like the picture of the little flower coming up through the dirt, you know, that need to somehow reach towards the sun. So this is, take a minute, you can write this down. I'm assuming this YouTube isn't going to work for me either. And this is the science of resiliency. And if we could watch this, what it would show is that there's a fulcrum, right? And on the fulcrum, there's different experiences. There's negative and positive. And so when kids have had negative experiences, they need more positive ones to counteract that. And we're going to look at what some of those positive experiences can be for them. The other thing that this video shows is the give and take. So children need positive responses from their caregivers, and if they don't get positive responses from their caregiver, it's very hard for them to thrive and grow. So what makes a child resilient? And so this is really what comes from research and the literature. And I think if I had asked you to name one thing, what people usually think about is they need a good parent, right? They need a good caregiver. And that certainly is the most dominant way of making a child resilient. And what we have found, you know, in working with children who are in the foster care system or the child welfare system, that often it's not a parent who is doing that for a child. And so what our responsibility becomes is to either be that person for them, right, or to help link them to that person who can do that for them. But we all need somebody who believes in us, loves us, nurtures us, and we can't thrive without that. Sometimes the child's own temperament, and that's not something that we can control, but it is something that factors into this that helps make them resilient. We need to affirm their ethnic and culture identification. Ask the child about their culture, their race, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, their gender, their spiritual beliefs, their socioeconomic class and political views. Often these things aren't talked about, but these are the things that sort of make us who we are, right? And they're things that are important to us, and that wherever they are, we just need to love and accept them for whoever they see themselves as they are. Another way to build resiliency in children is really help them to learn to self-soothe. That can be through listening to music, affirmative self-talk. I talk to myself all the time, but we want children to learn to be able to talk to themselves in a positive way, right? And how can they do that when they're in a stressful environment, whether that's at school or a visit with their parents, or when they're often, you know, people have difficulty when they go to bed at night. That's sometimes when things kind of crowd in their head, that they need a little more time of reassurance. Help them to daydream about a positive future. I always like to ask children, like, so what are you going to be when you grow up? What kind of person are you going to be? Are you going to be a parent? And if you are, what kind of parent are you going to be? To make them realize, like, there's a future and they have some control over that, because often they've lost control of what's happening to them within their current family. Ability to choose people who model pro-social behaviors. Again, the modeling is so important. We know that's really how children learn. So if you can show them that you can stay calm in stressful situations, that you can problem solve, that you can talk about your feelings, right? All those things are very positive, and they can start to model that. And I had said this a little earlier, get them involved in sports, physical activities, any of the arts, acting, whatever it is that is of interest to them. That really has shown over and over in the research that this cultivates resiliency for them. Schooling is so important, and often kids who have moved different caregivers in different places, their schooling often gets neglected, or they're being moved different schools and they get behind, or their behavior is interfering. And I think this is the strength of this program, right? Their behavior is interfering in their schooling, and the school is not able to manage that. Meetings, IEPs, assessments, anything that you can do to help keep that kid on track educationally is very, very helpful for them. And anything you can do to get them to stay in school as well. I mean, the research is very clear on that. You want them to pursue their own personal achievement. You want them to set goals, help them set goals, small goals, long-term goals. Talk about those type of things with them. You want them to have positive peer relationships, so you want to monitor that as well and give direction. You want to teach them problem solving, and I put this on here. It's simple problem solving, but if we can really help them take that moment and not react, right, when they're angry or they're stressed and upset, and say, I have a problem, right? This is my problem. Let's talk about ways we can solve the problem together. Let's try it. If that works, wonderful. If it doesn't work, let's go back to the table and figure out how to problem solve it, so that they're really learning to problem solve instead of being reactive. That's one of the best things we can teach them. We want to work on social confidence. Again, this is, sort of common sense, but so important. Teach them social skills, flexibility, empathy, caring, communication skills, and having humor. That's all one sentence, but it's huge. So I'm sure with social skills, we know being flexible, I think you can really model that and talk to them about it. Empathy, the thing with empathy and teaching empathy, we really want to work with them all the time. I wonder how that other person is feeling, right? What's happening with them, that they get to understand that everybody has feelings, and how we interact with others impact them. And again, I think with caring, so much of that is modeled. Good communication skills, slow them down. Let's talk about it. So important. Spiritual grounding and faith is shown over and over in the research, is really important. I think when I think of, and we're going to get to this, I think with adolescent sexual abuse survivors, that sometimes this can be really helpful. But kids very early on often have a sense of spirituality, and it's often something that we can build with them. And as you can see when we get to the next one, churches, they're wonderful communities, community centers, connecting them to neighbors, connecting them to things like chores, domestic activities. Any of those things will help them build resiliency. You want to help them express their emotions. There's handouts. I shouldn't say there's handout. I usually use a handout here of all the different feelings. You can get magnets that you put on your refrigerator with the different feelings, or even handouts. And if you can get your child to start to identify what they're feeling in that moment and to talk about it, it's really helpful for them. Often they don't know the right way to emotionally express themselves. The other thing I like to do with them is even to, there's a lot of emotions depending on the developmental level of your child, but to just say, okay, tell me about a time you were happy. Tell me about a time you were sad. Tell me about a time when you were in disbelief, right? That you start to get their stories around the emotions that they felt throughout their life. All those things are so important to them. You want to teach them to be, I always say this to my students, you want to teach them to be lifelong learners, right? You want to teach them to think critically. I think the best way to do this, of course, is school, education, but to have those conversations with them. I'm wondering what was going on there. Like, help them to be curious about things, to question things, right? They often say that if they can use the abuse as a means to learn and grow, that can also be very, very helpful. The ability to frame one's experience into useful lessons. Let them talk about the experience and how it has affected them. I hear so often, I hear all the time, like, I'm afraid if they start to talk to me like, what's going to happen, like, right? Can they handle the emotion? And I often think, can the child handle the emotion, or can we handle the emotion of hearing them talk about such difficult things? They've lived it. They've experienced it. It's really helpful for them to have somebody to talk to about it. And not everybody can open themselves up to hear what's happened to a child when they've been mistreated. So anything that you can do to listen to the story and hold it for them and just validate it and acknowledge it can be really helpful for them. Ability to develop creative ways to survive, such as finding secret hiding places. And this might be a little bit more for, children who are at home in a difficult situation. I've had kids where their parents, they fight a lot, they yell a lot, and I'll say, so what do you do when that happens? Can you go to the neighbors? Do you have a friend down the street? If they're old enough to do that. If they're latency age, I might say, can you go to your room and shut the door and put the music on? Are there ways that they can learn to protect themselves and take themselves out of this situation if possible? And of course, the ability to seek and make use of professional or self-help therapeutic activities, individual therapy, group therapy, trauma therapy. A lot of the support groups can be very helpful for kids. Often when children are maltreated, they think it's something that they've done and it's about them. And if they can understand that other children have gone through that and have experiences with those children, that can be very healing for them. Books tell different stories about things that have happened that can be helpful for them. Let them tell their story. They say when the narrative is well built with a coherent story, significance, and a positive self-image, they're really assessing their role in the adversity in terms of the degree of control that they had, whether they're feeling guilty or responsible, whether they were active or passive. It can really reduce the traumatic effects. And you want to be careful in doing that you do it gradually and over time and put it together. If they start to show some type of their bodies if they start to breathe heavy or they start to seem scared, then it's time to stop the storytelling and go back to it at another time. But anything that we can do to listen to their stories and build the whole story together for them will be very, very helpful for them. Ability to assess reality for what it is and have some concept of self as a valuable identity. The will to have something better than in the past. That's what I sort of said when I talked to them. So when you grow up, what type of parent are you going to be? What are you going to do? It's so interesting when I teach this in class. Students often say kids won't repeat a cycle because we know so much of abuse is generational. If at some point they can have that ha-ha moment, I can do something different. And children, when they're exposed to a different environment, can realize, like, not all families are the same, that some families are warm and nurturing and caring, and that often can be the aha moment. I can have a family like that. I can grow up and be like that. That's why I often think so often caregivers and foster parents have had often some kind of adversity themselves, right, in their childhood, and can come back and say, I made a difference for myself, but I can make a difference for this child too. It's good stuff. We talked about dreaming. And then siblings are really important. Keeping contact with siblings are important. And another thing that's really important are pets. And they show over and over in the research that often when a child's been maltreated, they have a hard time loving people, especially like parent figures, right? Because a parent figure hurt them at one point. That sometimes what they can do is really be loving and affectionate to a dog, a guinea pig, a cat. It's a way that they can give and receive love that doesn't feel scary to them. So if you have a child who's really having a difficult time with attachment issues, you can try to get and if they want a pet, that could really be something positive for them. This was a study of female survivors of sexual abuse. What the research shows that was helpful for them was their ability to find supportive relationships outside the family of origin, to develop this sense of positive self-regard. Anything we can do to build people up is really positive, and we can do that often by helping them be successful. And we can help them, in things like being successful at school, successful in sports, successful with relationships. Then I had thought this was in here as well, the spiritual grounding, right? Use spiritual grounding sometimes in the form of religion to bring them through the difficult times. Over and over in the research, it shows that this is very helpful. For people, I say, this is about maltreated children, but I do counseling. It's helpful for adults too, if that's something that they have found helpful. Not everybody is in the religion or spirituality, but there's a lot of positive healing that can come out of it if people are open to it. They recognize their own personal power, right? So isn't what often people become disempowered when they've been abused, but if we can help them get that power back, let them make as many choices and decisions about life that you can, that helps them to feel like they can start to have some kind of power over their environment. They brought their locus of control inward while contributing blame and responsibility rightly to their abuser. So when they're telling you their story, it's really important to say, like, listen, you were just a little kid, right? Kids aren't responsible for that. You couldn't control that. It's not okay what they did to you. That really can help them put the blame where it needs to be and not on themselves. Teach them coping skills. I can't get into these websites, I don't think, but if you want to write this down, you can. It's Your Life, Your Voice. I believe it's, I want to say it's St. Jude's has a lot of resources, and one of the things that they have are 99 coping skills for children. And I often like to use that worksheet to say, hey, look, here's 99 coping skills. Let's look at them. Tell me which ones you think would work for you. It could be taking a walk, reading a book. There's a whole bunch of ideas, but things that they can start to choose from. The other thing is that, in our modern age with cell phones and apps and all these other little tablets that we have out there, there's a lot of mindfulness apps that they can teach them mindfulness, coping skills, resilience, anger management, problem solving, often with games, all those things. Kids are a little more open to that. I think especially like at latency age and teenagers, there's also a lot of support if they're having for texting, like if they're having a difficult time or they're having suicidal ideations, where they can be connected to somebody just to have support. Sometimes that feels, a little bit like confident. I think I'm trying to think of the right way for it, but like their friends aren't going to know about it. You're not going to know about it. It's a safe place where they can talk to people about some of these thoughts that are happening in their head. You want to work with a child, build their self-esteem, build them up instead of tearing them down. I had a handout for that, sorry. Have it. I'm happy, just to say this, I'm happy to give my email and give more resources if people are interested. I have a number of resources and websites that really give some, tools that you can use with the kids. Be mindful, anything that you can teach children to be aware of their bodies, right? What happens when they're scared, they're angry, upset, and building awareness, it helps them build control of it and do things that are positive instead of reactive, so that they can teach their bodies to relax. Breathing exercises, counting to 10 or maybe 100. I always teach my kids that I work with in my practice, if they're having trouble sleeping at night, count backwards from 100 to 1. Try to do that because it takes your focus, right? But think of little things like that. Again, there's a lot of tools around this online. If you just Google a little bit, you can find them. Take a walk, talk to a friend. Have realistic expectation for children who have been maltreated. And I always say, remember to measure success differently. These aren't kids that you're just going to fix right away. It might be that today they remember to say to you, I was feeling a certain way, right? That's success. So any little success that you have, just hold on to that, reinforce it. Children who have been abused and neglected need nurturance, stability, predictability, understanding, and support. I'm sorry. In 2012, approximately 686,000 children were victims of abuse and neglect in the United States. It's huge, right? For children who are placed out of, I think it's skipping on me. Children who are placed out of home care, anything you can do to keep siblings together, unless, of course, that relationship is abusive or negative, and sometimes it is, but if not, to keep them in touch with each other. And it's as much natural contact as possible. Can you meet at a restaurant, a playground? Can they come over to your house and play if they're not living with you? Anything to keep children in their communities and their school is positive. The more stable they can be, the less changes that they have. Of course, that's common sense. It's positive for them. Children actually should be placed with their own ethnicity and race. That's what the research shows. If possible, it shows that helps them to build resiliency. I know that's not always realistic, but that's a place where we need to start. Children who identify as LGBTQA, they need to be accepted for their sexual identity and orientation and ensure their home is adequately trained and accepting of them. This population particularly have a lot of struggles with depression and suicide, but it's really because people don't understand them and accept them. And just as children need foster homes that are willing to commit long-term, that the home needs to be warm and nurturing. That it's helpful for them if you can accept the relationship with their biological family, whether it's positive or negative. And I just threw this in here. Therapeutic foster care isn't effective if it means the child has to move. Wherever the child starts to feel attached and to thrive and grow, it's in their best interest to stay in that environment. It's not helpful. Every time they move, they lose ground on attachment and on building resiliency. So the less moves, the better. And then I just said, we really need to look at extended family, fathers and their extended families. It's an area that's not been explored properly. Just things to be careful about. Focusing on pathology is not helpful to the child. Labels like at risk or impoverished are not helpful. Being punitive is not helpful. Over and over, the research shows, physical discipline doesn't work. Devaluing people doesn't work. Being punitive doesn't work. What helps is the warmth, the nurturing. That doesn't mean that there's not structure and discipline. Those are helpful as well, but we need to be careful how we're doing that. Not all children can be resilient, or if so, not at the same level. We can't compare and contrast. We just need to accept them for where they're at. And just reminders, children need to be bought in. What works for someone may not work for someone else. Children need to be involved in their own planning. Again, we talked earlier about when people feel like they've lost that sense of control. It's a way of getting that sense of control back, but it's not going to work if they're not part of it. The goal is not to address the problem one time, but to teach them to be resilient throughout their life. Don't give them a fish, teach them to fish. That's really the long-term goal. And then I wrote this little poem just because I love it, and so I'll share it with you. When will we also teach them what they are? We should say to each of them, do you know what you are? You are a marvel. You are unique. In all the years that have passed, there has never been another child like you. Your legs, your arms, your clever fingers, the way you move. You may become a Shakespeare, a Michelangelo, a Beethoven. You have the capacity for anything. Yes, you are a marvel. And when you grow up, can you then harm another who is like you, a marvel? You must work. We must all work to make the world worthy of the children. So 10 ways to build resilience, just a little recap. Make connections. Avoid seeing crises as insurmountable problems. Accept that change is a part of living. Move towards your goals. Take decisive actions. Look for opportunity for self-discovery. Nurture a positive view of yourself. Keep things in perspective. Maintain a hopeful outlook and take care of yourself. So that's so important too, right? We can't care for others if we're not taking care of ourselves. And that's a whole nother presentation for another day. This is just a cute little video that's you can look at. It's really for adolescents on how to take care of themselves and to carry on being awesome. So don't give up. Keep going. You can do this. Just take a moment as a takeaway. Can you each tell me 3 things you can do in your normal day in your family, your neighborhood, your community to build resilience in children who are part of your journey? So just think about that a minute. Let me see if there's anything else. I thought that was it. So that's it. I haven't been looking to see if there's any questions coming up. I got some. Please send me resources. So let me write those down.
This presentation will be available on our YouTube page and our website. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us today. Please fill out the survey that you are sent in your email after you log out. That is one of the ways we can continue to bring you information like this. And unless anybody has a question, that concludes this webinar. I have put my contact information there. It is candrews@pickupdel.org. And Lydia will also contact you if you have included your email.
Yes,
Thank
I
you
have
so
Margaret.
much.
I have Margarita's email. If anybody else has an email and you would like me to send resources, I'm happy to do that. Just type it, and I'm making a list. I have a hand raised. I don't know how to do that, Christina. Just click on it.
What are you doing?
There's a hand raised.
Oh, I see. Yes, you can right-click on it.
Oh, okay. I see her email now. Michelle and Chetana. Oh, okay, I got it.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.